Hi friends, welcome to CodeNet, and today we want to progress and see how we can work with HTML element and also just to understand what HTML elements are and the different types of HTML elements. So in HTML, an element of HTML simply consists of data that should be in between the starting tag and the ending tag, meaning an element of HTML is everything from the starting tag, the content in between, and the ending tag. Though not each and every element should have an ending tag, we will see the different types of elements that don't actually need to have an ending tag, and hence they are called empty elements. Now, in HTML, of course, even from our previous session, you can tell that one of the elements of HTML that we have is simply HTML itself, and since it has an ending tag, then we can say it is definitely an HTML element. Another element of HTML that we have is simply the body, and since it has the closing tag, then it is definitely an element of HTML. So this is how we implement the element. We provide the starting tag and simply the ending tag, the starting tag and also the ending tag. Now from here you can start asking now, okay, then HTML as an element, what is it called and what is its work towards the HTML document? HTML as simply an element of HTML, simply we can call it a root element, and each and every content of HTML should be inside an HTML as simply an element. Of course, you can even tell that also the body is inside the HTML element. The body now holds on to data that should be displayed by the HTML document. Each and every content that needs to be displayed on the browser or anything should be inside the HTML element as an element of HTML. So these are the actual elements of HTML. Now the other elements of HTML, the ones that we've not yet even looked at inside our code, even in our previous session, is an element which is called the heading as an element of HTML. The heading as an element of HTML is simply denoted by H1, of course, for the larger headings, H2, second, of course, in largeness from H1, then we have H3, H4, H5, and H6 is simply any heading which could be first heading. If you want to display the heading that's maybe more descriptive, the heading that is more of importance, then we can use H1 or H2. If we want to display the heading that is maybe less importance, then we can use H5 and H6, anything depending on your description. Practically, let's see how the heading works as an element of HTML. So we can say, of course, H1, we start, of course, by creating a starting tag, which is H1, and we even close. Immediately when we close, Visual Studio will provide the ending tag, because Visual Studio definitely knows that elements of HTML should have a starting and a closing. So immediately we do that, then definitely we'll be given also the closing element as also the closing tag of HTML. So we can say, hey, this is my first heading, since we've provided the very first heading. Now let's also provide another heading of HTML for we to see the difference between H1, H3, and also H6. Let's provide, of course, maybe H3 as an heading of HTML. So we now create the starting tag, which is H3. Immediately we close Visual Studio as an IDE, it will provide the ending tag, and then we can say, hey, this is automatically my third heading. And after that, let's also provide the sixth one, because we want to also understand the difference in terms of headings as elements of HTML. We will see on which one will be the largest and which one will be the smallest, and then from there we can, of course, specify this is H6. It only learns from H1 to H6, and then we can do so, and then here we can say, hey, this is my 6th, and definitely this is my 6th heading. And from here, if we go back on our browser, we refresh, definitely we need to Ctrl S to save the document, or go on where it says file and then click on where it says save for you to save the document. Definitely, if you go back on the browser, I'm sure you understand now how you can integrate your browser, of course connect it to the IDE for you to be seeing the content that you are making. If you don't understand that, check on the previous session, the introduction. You of course have an understanding and reach the same level where we are. If you refresh also your browser, you can tell that, hey, this is my first heading, hey, this is my third heading, hey, this is my sixth heading. I'm sure you can also tell the eyes, they can't even see properly. So this is how this heading element of HTML actually does. We use it immediately and whenever we want to specify the actual heading that we see might be important at that position. For example, if it is maybe the first title of the web page, it might be appropriate to use H1, H2 or H3. But if we want to pass in subheadings, less important information, then H4 or H5 might be appropriate. Let's go back on our IDE for we to understand how we can also implement other elements of HTML. Another element of HTML is simply an element which is called a paragraph. Like in the normal technical writing and anything related to that, a paragraph, we use a paragraph when we want to explain something. That is how also the heading and the paragraphs actually work. In the normal technical writing, definitely we don't start with a paragraph then the heading. No, the heading should be first followed by a paragraph. That is what also HTML respects. We should first provide a heading, then the paragraph, depending on the actual design of the web content that you want to display to the other people. So how do now an element which is called a paragraph get denoted that this is a paragraph? We use the actual letter of the alphabet P to stand in for a paragraph. Now it should have an opening tag which is P, and also when we close, definitely a closing tag or an ending tag will be provided. You can tell that the only difference between a starting tag and a closing tag is simply the forward slash. So a starting tag should have no forward slash. Definitely you can tell. Now the ending tag should have a forward slash then followed by the keyword which will denote the actual element that we are definitely working with. So to denote a paragraph, since it is a paragraph, then definitely we can write anything for as long as we understand that it is a paragraph. So we'll say I am now making the actual paragraph for my very first heading as I provided above. So this is the actual content now. So this is a paragraph, and even if we were to copy this paragraph and paste on the next heading, definitely we'll see that a paragraph will stick to the same font size and anything related to that, unlike for the heading, because the heading, of course, we have H1, the bigger one, H3, the smaller, and then H6, of course, the smallest. If we go back on our web browser, of course, the one I'm using is Google Chrome. If we go back and definitely we refresh, we'll see that we also have a paragraph. You can tell the difference between a paragraph and the heading. Even though H6 is of course a heading, but you can tell that it is in bold. Unlike for paragraphs, they are not in bold. Hence, that is one of the differences between paragraphs and headings. And a paragraph is simply used when we want to explain the content in the head. So these are one of the headings that are available in HTML. Now we can of course understand something when it comes to the elements of HTML. From here you can of course entail that some elements of HTML are within other elements of HTML. For example, if we go back on our IDE, you can tell that of course the body element is within the HTML element, and of course the H1 element is within the body element. So these elements, like the HTML, the one that allows other elements to be inside them, they are called nested elements because they are allowing other elements to be occupied inside. Hence, H1 paragraphs, they are all part of the body element, hence they are nested inside the body element. The other types of elements that we can talk about, the last two elements, is simply the elements that don't contain the ending tag. You can tell that a paragraph, of course, contains an ending tag, which is a paragraph with, which precedes the actual letter that denotes the element with a forward slash. Also here we have the ending tag. Also including to the heads. The heads contains, of course, ending tags. Also here we have the ending tag. Also here we have the ending tag. Also the HTML has an ending tag. The body also has an ending tag. Hence, we can tell that they are definitely elements of HTML. But there are some types of elements which do not contain the ending tags, and these elements, of course, the popular two elements that we talk about are called empty elements. One of the very first element is an element which is denoted, of course, we start by creating the starting tag, which is, of course, HR. It is called a horizontal row element of HTML. Now we'll see what it does when we go back on our browser. Another type of an element is simply an element which we denote by creating, of course, a starting tag. I'm sure you can also tell where I'm writing this element, and then BR. This is called a line break element. It allows the next content to be printed on a new line. This will be printed on each line, and also the next content, it's more like breaking this line, saying okay, this line should be printed on its own line, and it will end here. The next line again should be printed on a new line, not in the same line. And this won't be I am now making the actual paragraph. No, it will be I'm now making the actual, then this will be paragraph for my very first heading. And then the horizontal as an empty element just, of course, creates the partition between the content on the top and the content down here. We'll see on how they work when we go on our browser. Let's go back. Of course, Ctrl S to save. My document is on not to save. Once I refresh, this is the actual implementation. So here, instead of having one line, I am now making the actual paragraph because we implemented definitely an empty element called the line break element. We've printed this on a new line, and here we've created a partition between the top things and, of course, the things that are down below, and this is the line we are seeing, hence creating an element which is called a horizontal row. So this is the actual content that we can present for today on the elements of HTML. These are the basic elements of HTML. Of course, we have the HTML, the body, H1, paragraph, horizontal row, H3, H6, meaning headings can stand from H1 to H6. Please don't forget to subscribe, and let's progress on our next session as we understand now the attributes of HTML. Please don't forget you are on CodeNet.